Pointed in Governor Strickland's State of the State address on a number of fronts. I think just from the outset I felt that Governor Strickland was enthusiastically out of touch with really the reality of our current situation. He spent a lot of time talking about some minor economic proposals that I don't think are going to really have any impact. I think ultimately they're just going to spend money that we don't have. He never addressed any of the multiple 800-pound gorillas in the room, namely a structural deficit in the neighborhood of $7 to $8 billion in our next two-year budget that, by the way, is just a year off, that we're going to be sitting in Finance Committee trying to address that shortfall, whoever the next governor is. And so when I say $7 or $8 billion shortfall, I mean 7 or 8 billion out of a $50 billion budget. So we're talking about 16–17% of our next budget we don't even have. So no mention of any attempt to try and do any cost savings of any significance, any structural changes, or any real initiatives to try to turn around the economy to be able to come up with these tax revenues. So that's troubling. And that's not even the only major issue we're facing that he didn't address. We've got the state police and fire pension funds, the teachers' retirement funds that are underfunded, that are going to need some real reworkings in terms of the benefits as well as how much the employers and employees are paying in. Didn't even mention it. It's like it doesn't exist. So once again, I think Governor Strickland is completely and totally out of touch with the people that he is representing. We've seen the unemployment rate double over the last 3 years. And it's interesting because he doesn't want to accept the blame for it, which kind of makes you wonder, well, when things turn around, does that mean he should not get any of the credit for it either? But that's another issue. But ultimately, in the State of the State address, it was just disappointing that when we've got this huge structural deficit, we've got pension funds that need to be addressed, no mention. It's like it doesn't exist. So there was no proposal to try to tackle any of those tough issues that we're ultimately facing. And to me, that should be part of what the State of the State is about. It's not to go in there and do some of his preaching and things like that. It was, to me, it should be the opportunity to lay out some bold initiatives to try to make some changes to address some of the major problems that Ohio faces.
Did you hear anything today that you support?
Well, I think certainly he did talk about the third frontier renewal. And I think to some degree I support that from the standpoint of putting it on the ballot and let the voters decide. Any chance it's going to need to have the issue 2 component attached to it, just as it did back in 2005 when it passed before. If you remember, the first time it was on the ballot, it stood on its own back in 2003 and it failed. My view is, and I do try to get out in my district and I listen to people, my sense is there would be a lot more hesitation today than there would have been in 2005 or 2003 to the notion of Ohio borrowing more money and investing it, no matter how good the investment may be, which I think issue 2, we certainly have a lot of evidence to show that those are good investments in our roads, bridges, water, sewer projects. I think those are sound investments, but I think there'd be more hesitation than ever even to invest in that, much less a lot of high-tech research and development that, quite frankly, the bulk of it goes to Cincinnati, Columbus, Toledo, Cleveland, and some of the universities around the state. Well, my 9 counties that I represent in eastern and southern Ohio, with the exception of maybe Athens County, most of them don't really see any initial benefits to that research and development that they can really go out and see and touch and look at any job creation. Whereas issue 2 money typically is spread around and every county will at least get something. And there's certainly infinite need in the counties that I represent and probably all across the state of Ohio for solid water and sewer projects that are good for the environment, good for economic development. So ultimately it'll be up for the voters to decide. It becomes an issue though of just how much can we afford, and I think we should have a scaled down version, one that might even have a chance of passing, and 2 is prudent and fiscally prudent enough to where we're not borrowing so much debt that we're not going to be able to make the bond service payments over the coming years and just add that much more to our structural deficit that I've already talked about. So that part of his State of the State, I think, I support part of it, probably at a much more scaled down version than what the governor has been pushing, but I think there's room to negotiate on that. Unfortunately, though, those benefits typically from Third Frontier are more long-term, which is fine, but they're not doing really a whole lot of anything to get us out of the immediate concerns that I've spoken to with our police and fire pensions, our public employee pensions, our state teachers' retirement systems, not to mention our unemployment trust fund, which we already are in the red over $1 billion to the state of, or to the federal government. It's looking to end up being $2 or $3 billion that we're going to at some point have to repay the federal government on. No mention of that either in the State of the State address. So these are big problems that we're facing today and tomorrow and next week, next month and next year. No mention of.